Good evening, everybody. My name is Cormac Kinsella, and you're very welcome to the Boris Festival of Writing Ideas online book club. This is the second book club we're having this spring ahead of this year's festival. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Enright, who's going to discuss her new book, The Wren, which was published last autumn. And it was born in Dublin, where she now lives, and she's written two collections of stories published together in Yesterday's Weather, one book of non-fiction, Making Babies, which is a roaring success, and seven novels, including The Gathering, which won the 2007 Man Booker Prize, The Forgotten Waltz, which was awarded the
eight.
Eight
I
novels.
think it's eight.
Eight, including this one, though.
Oh, including this one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cormac. I'm breaking all the rules.
Don't worry. The Forgotten Waltz, that was awarded the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, and The Green Road, which was the Boardcourt Energy Novel of the Year and won the Kerry Group Irish Fiction Award. In 2015, she was appointed the first laureate for Irish fiction, and in 2018 received the Irish Pen Award for Outstanding Contribution to Irish Literature. And last year at the Irish Book Awards, she was the recipient of the 2022 Lifetime Achievement Award. So, Anne, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting.
Not at all.
Yeah,
interrupt anytime.
Yeah.
I want to start by talking about Nell, who is this amazingly drawn young woman in her 20s. She's kind of exciting. She's a little bit lost. And could you just start by telling us about her? Just who she is, what does she do, where is she in life?
Yeah. Well, I started the book with Nell, but I didn't start the writing with Nell. I started the writing with her mother Carmel and her grandfather Phil. And about a year into doing the book, Nell arrived, and suddenly the story made sense. I knew what the pleasures of it were, what the problem was. I knew what the kind of small tragedies were. So Nell is very much herself. So what else can I say? She's a young woman who is very much herself. And I wanted to catch that kind of thing that babies have, and on day one, that you look at them and say, oh, this is now the person that's here. That utterness of their personality, that kind of essence of being themselves, that she never loses, which is a kind of great luxury that previous generations didn't always have, just to be in the expanse of herself. So she goes off, she leaves her mammy behind and gets a bad room in the center of town where she can't afford the rents. She's very contemporary, although the book stops before 2019, so it's set in the last 10 or 15 years, and she's very online. She's doing piecework, supplying content for an agency in London. She's just lying in bed all day writing, and so unlike the home life of our own dear queen. And but she's very contemporary. She sees herself as lost in late capitalism. She's full of opinions. I didn't put too many opinions in there, but she's got a lot of attitude, and she has a very intense relationship to language, or language just happens for her. Like it kind of breaks into something kind of exciting while she's talking. So she's
it'll make more sense later on in the chat, but her own independence and getting out from under her mother is really essential to her, isn't it? I mean, that's she's 2 years out of college, and she leaves a very nice house which isn't damp for a very small unpleasant house in the center of town which is kind of damp, and she has her adventures and her difficulties there. So she has her doomed love affair, her obsessive love affair with a guy called Phelim, who comes from County Louth. Or as Nell says, Louth, actually. Well, in the planning, or in feeling her way into Nell's character, was there always going to be a doomed love affair, or?
So I was quite interested in the kind of youthful interest that women have in terrible relationships. Okay. I find if you kind of flip the coin or go back a bit, you kind of see that people have been interested in doomed relationships for a very long time. But in this kind of very visual, very online age, it's kind of styled as, sexual submissiveness or something. Is that what it is? Anyway, that's what it turns out to be for Nell.
And is that, do
I'm
you think
kind of interested in the language we use to describe the same things over and over again. And in the case of young women, sort of wag a finger and blame them for it, and say, are they glamorizing this, and why are they writing about this, and why are they not better feminists, and all kinds of things for feelings and contradictions that people have been working through, no matter what age or gender, for all the ages.
And that's a massive theme throughout all the relationships in the book, that I feel that what you've done is, but certainly what in all of the relationships, whether they're sibling or mother-daughter or father-mother, or everything is complicated.
Yeah, everything is not just one thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, you might think of Phelim as one thing, except you kind of, if you're reading it from a slight distance, you might say, well, actually, he's got a whole other life that Nell doesn't know about. It's very much Nell's point of view. He has a whole other life. He probably has a whole other relationship. He has all kinds of other things going. This is a particular space for him too. So we only see what she sees and what she makes of him. And in a way, I suppose she creates him to an extent.
I mean, she thinks she realizes that towards the end, like the last couple of, the last part, she realizes that she was just another number on the phone, or another.
Yeah. She was just another photo on the phone, and as well, she was just part of his. I mean, I think Phelim is a really interesting kind of problematic character. But I find people quite mysterious, so I don't want to lay it all bare with Phelim. She goes back to their house in County Louth, and there's three brothers, and Cahill, the first guy, is completely brilliant, lovely guy with a young family who's going to inherit the farm.
Yes, as far as we know.
Then there's another, as far as Nell can tell. Then there's another guy who's a real, we're not going near him. Okay, he's the psycho. So Phelim somewhere, what Phelim just then talks in this quite modernist way. He talks like a bloke. It's all fair enough, how's it going? You're not going to get much information from Phelim about Phelim. She finds his Twitter feed in about 2.5 seconds and sees 500 dead tweets about football,
But also, and apart from the red flag, when they meet first, and he picks her up by the neck.
By the head, yeah.
By the head, yeah. But
by the base of the skull, yeah.
But also,
it's not a red flag. It's not a red flag. He could just be a broth of a boy,
He could be. He could be just very affectionate and exuberant. Yeah.
She asks him. They queue up and they tap him on the back, and they say, "Me next, me next."
Yeah. The car magazines is the other one as well. That
Yeah, she sees him in a shop on the quays, and he's looking at. This was some quite intensive research, because shops don't store magazines anymore. They don't shelve them in a lot of the the little newsagents anymore. But they did in those days have. So he's looking at car magazines.
Yeah. And was there a big deep dive for you into social media, or was that did you actually have to just go online forever to see what?
She's in early days online.
Yeah.
So the algorithms aren't pushing the material at her. So there's that early sense that you're looking for stuff, and oh my God, there's a cute picture. I must call everyone and show it to them, because I don't yet know how to send it to people. So there's that kind of that idea of it as an interesting space, which we don't. But actually, I wanted it to be an extension of her head. When young people have a lot of young people writing now don't put the internet in the books because it spoils it. It's like the mobile phone has wrecked the thriller plot, that everything can be known. Or they say, so there is a kind of analog, a kind of fashion for analog. I was really interested to see Nico Flattery go back to Andy Warhol days. I mean, we're looking at pick up dial and dial phone.
Yeah.
So I made the barrier between online and offline very impermeable. You don't see her picking up the phone more or less. It's just there. It's part of her thoughts. It's just
Yeah,
where
that
she
is,
is.
I think very much the way social media has grabbed us, isn't it? Is that it has
Sure.
become like you do nothing without, isn't there there's a line in the book, is the equivalent of a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it. If something's not posted, does it even exist? Or
Does it exist?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of it was the research was interesting when I came across this kind of period app called Flow, and
Right.
all these women, when Roe v. Wade was revoked in the States, people were told to delete this app because it had all their information about their cycle and everything. They just tell the internet.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay, off you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Like with no idea of a difference between personal and online space. And that
Yeah.
actually was a bit like some of the women I used to write about way back in the day who were kind of involved in these kind of systems one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And her relationship with Carmel is, I mean, can we talk about Carmel first? But maybe could we just get a short reading before
So
we
we'll do a bit of Nell, will
bit
we?
of Nell, yeah. Thank
I'm seeing
you.
recently I went back to see what had been going through my mind in the weeks and months I spent falling apart in that horrible moldy house while going out clubbing and getting lifted by the head. Mal, her gay friend, was disappearing into Instagram, posting photo after photo of his long shadow on the grass, his bent shadow on a building, his shadow on the water. I was trying to write poetry on pieces of paper because I thought that using real paper meant they were real poems. Meanwhile, I supplied a list of things overheard on the bus to a woman who had not been on a bus in many years. I went through her multi-poo pics thinking, if only one of them was a Jack Russell, there would be so many jokes here. For inspiration, I watched animal reunion videos. A kitten bounds over to play with an eagerly trotting hen. A huge rabbit nuzzles a small dog. A swan is released from a sack and it dashes across the pond to join another swan. They twist neck to neck, making hearts, making curves. Humans did not interest me so much unless one of them was in uniform. Mom's been in Iraq. Daddy's back from Kandahar. I was also supremely held by the spiritual precision of coffins received home from war. What I was addicted to, I think, in my little bubble of sorrow in Ballybock was the prick of tears, that tiny, painful surge in the eyeball rind. It did not produce much liquid. I usually took the tear back into me, down some tiny inner drain.
That's fantastic. And
I
that's really,
love Nell.
yeah.
I found her so
Yeah.
easy to write.
You too. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just loved her.
Yeah.
I loved the way she went for it,
Yeah.
and that unself-consciousness and the way she could say she could the lyricism in her point of view was really it was really
And
refreshing for me.
I mean, what is great is that she's not all hard. There's ability,
No, she's a
yeah,
passionate
yeah,
presence. She's still
yeah,
very open and naive.
yeah.
I don't think she's hard at all. And she has friends that she talks about, the way girls talk about their friends all the time. Lily does this and
Yeah,
whatever, the way
yeah,
she talks
yeah,
about her friends. And yet the friends never appear in the book, but Maya, there's a girl
yeah.
called Maya and that kind of thing. It was just so much fun to write.
Right. And then having started with, you said at the start that you didn't start with Nell, but Nell just appeared. So where did she come from then, or was it just
Well, I had to get her mother pregnant,
to get
which
her mother?
is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's just like one of the things you have to
yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
on a long Tuesday when you're writing a book and you're
Right,
saying, now, how am I going to get Carmel pregnant? Carmel
right,
wasn't
right.
really interested in getting pregnant, but I knew if she did get
Yeah.
pregnant, that
And
it
so
would really,
was the original idea then a two-generational rather than, or was
I
it?
didn't really have an idea. If I had
Okay.
an
Yeah.
idea, I'd have a more describable book,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, I'm kind of hard put to describe it once I've got it done. Somebody recently said it was about unhappy families, and I thought, are they a family? It's just like I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a family?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't think it's too
They're,
unhappy though. I think there's great hope in it, but that's just,
oh no, the book isn't
yeah.
unhappy. No,
No,
no.
no, no. So listen, Nell's mother, Carmel,
Where's the happy family? I want to
Yeah.
see the happy family
Yeah.
in fiction.
Yes. Yeah.
In life, of course, my own family is delighted most of the time with itself. Um, always permanently in a semi-state of somewhere between ecstasy and contentment.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Carmel. Carmel is
Nell's
her
mother.
mother, is Nell's mother, and I started with Carmel actually, and the poetry that her father wrote, and her personal sense of difficulty, which was and literal mindedness, her refusal of all the things that Nell swims through so easily, you know. So this is Carmel. She's had a tough childhood, and there's no flies on Carmel, and she's thinking about men, I suppose. An odd bunch over the years, her former lovers. He wouldn't exactly invite them to the same party, or to any party, some of them. Though she was a bit of an outlier herself, Carmel realised. She looked at the girls from school who found one or another man to marry. Oh, he's lovely! I could not help but find it all a bit high-pitched. Shortly after college, Haydamar Grant announced her engagement. That is actually what she called it. And Carmel was glad not to be asked for bridesmaid. Orla Hughes did the honours, and her puffy apricot dress was the only bit of comic relief on an otherwise relentless day. The groom was not the bed creaker from Capel Street, but another version of the same thing. Solid, backslapping, sound. Good man, right you are. Careful now. There you go. In all fairness, he said in his speech 6 times, Carmel could not imagine what it would be like to live with such a person. Haydamar would, in all fairness, be a long time hanging his washing off the line. I'd give it 6 months, she said to Orla Hughes. But 2 years later, Haydamar was still very much married with a baby on the way, and that was another hoo-ha. From the coy refusals of alcohol, to the coy announcement, to the considerable amounts of self-obsession, Haydamar did not seem to realise that this thing would happen to her body, whether she was stupid or clever or in a coma. She thought it was in some way about her. The baby quickly made it known that it was, in fact, massively about the baby, from the last-minute epidural to the grade 4 tear to the 6 weeks of colic, not to mention all the love required, often of a hysterical kind. The same mixture of cooing and shrieking around the cot that happened around the wedding. The sweetness of it set Carmel's teeth on edge. It was the sound women make, she thought, when they are offering their lives up for slow destruction and loving it and doing it for love. I'm feeling sorry for people who did not have this love in their lives, because my goodness, it was the winning ticket. It was success itself. It was the only game in town. So that's Carmel.
Fantastic.
She's a tough nut in some ways.
She's a tough nut. Kind of great though. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, and I get a high recognition factor from audiences when I read that. I mean, and then
you read it very well. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I give it a bit of extra welly, but
yeah.
People say, "Oh, I really like Carmel." I said, "Why do you like Carmel?" I mean, I knew when I settled into writing this kind of tough character, when you do, when you can't get away from a character, there is a sense of dread. You say, "Oh, I'm going to spend 3 years now with this, this very recognizable thing, very Irish in some way."
Yeah.
And I know, but that by the end of it all, I'll really like her too. Do you know what I mean? Or I will have understood her, or some kind of empathetic opening will happen between the writer, the reader, and a character like Carmel. But this is slightly mysterious to some women who've been reading the book and who say, "Yeah, Carmel, yeah, go her."
Yeah, she's great. And
she is great.
Her relationship with Imelda, her sister, is I think is really interesting, because it's again showing that we all have different, it's not we, but everyone has different parents in the sense that they had such a different relationship with their own mother and their own father.
Yeah, and it changes, and it sort of flips between them sometimes. Sometimes they change the versions slightly of their past. And that is an absolute thing for my novels. All contain multiple perspectives, from The Gathering and The Green Road or whatever. It's like essential to me that that stories should be seen from different perspectives, that people speak differently about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, Imelda's is
Mhm.
Carmel's older sister. She's very conscientious. She has to look after their mother when their mother gets sick with cancer. And she's very attached to that role. And she's kind of slightly disapproving. She also is a keeper of the flame, which is to say that she's really reverential towards the figure of their great father, Dado, as they call him, Phil, who is a poet, and she invests really strongly in this.
Right. Yeah. And they have an extraordinary fight, actually, which is, I mean, there's two big fights in the book.
There are no spoilers, no spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is quite
There
visceral.
are actually more than two.
Yeah.
So if you go back generations, there are the kind of, in Phil's generation, the physical engagement between characters is so normal that it's not mentioned.
Yeah.
There's a kind of throwaway remark about his mother beating other children, going off to teach and beating children who are not her own. It's not, and violence in that generation is almost made kind of sacred. There's quite a difficult passage involving animal cruelty.
Yeah.
Anyway, in Carmel's generation, it's kind of both kind of ordinary. And then when it happens in their older, really quite comical.
Yeah. It's I thought it was I mean, and again, it was brilliant showing the stress in a family that, like, not just an illness can have, but then obviously desertion can have as well. I mean, that really was all a breaking point, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, there was the fight happens after the mother dies, and so that is the great desertion. I mean, that's the great moment of abandonment, and when people don't always behave well, put it that way, or where it's very important to behave well because things are so raw, and there is an argy-bargy over the will.
Yeah. And they also have their own versions of Dado walking out as well.
They do. Well, I mean, there is quite a distressing scene, another distressing scene where Dado walks out and he goes through the mother's bedroom and bedclothes looking for something he's lost. And later Imelda says, no, he wasn't looking for his watch. He was just sorting. He was just making the bed. Yeah. But of course, a man like Phil wouldn't be capable of making a bed. That's far too complicated for a man like Phil. It can be expected. I mean, he does kind of tuck the sheets in, and then he says, "There, you do that." He says to his daughter, because men don't fiddly things with, Can you fold a sheet, Cormac? Can you fold clothes?
I can, yeah. No, I'm quite good at that. Yeah,
you're good. You're good at that.
Yeah. No, I was taught well. My mommy brought me up very well.
Yeah, sometimes you might buy something in a shop, and the male assistant is trying to fold it up and put it in a bag.
Yeah, I think it's the years of book selling as well. It was always the difficult ones to wrap were brought to me in Fred Hannes.
Okay, a bit of origami going on.
Yeah.
You can also wrap presents. That's really very dexterous. You don't say, I'm not doing that. That's too sissy for me. My hands don't work like that. You do that. Yeah.
So back to Carmel, her relationship with Ronan. This is a Ronan, but he's also a desperate idiot.
You'd think he's a desperate idiot. You see, I'm glad you have opinions about him. Yeah. Carmel thought he was a bit of an idiot.
Yeah.
I thought he was fine.
Yeah. But I thought he was just too charming and trying to be too charming. And that kind of, it was that self-effacement to the point of trying too hard, which I think she sensed. Now, I know we're talking about these people as if they actually exist, but they do exist on the page because they're brilliantly drawn. But I found, I just found him slightly unbearable after kind of page 4 of him.
He's a certain type of, and again, he had, his father was a big consultant, much revered, and he never really, he couldn't really get going because of the father's criticism. So there's something subdued about him, but he's very privileged. I mean, that's one of the things that annoys Carmel about him. He has a lovely apartment, and he has lovely pictures, and he has lovely all kinds of things just handed to him, and he plays the clarinet, and this also exists, I suppose.
And there's nearly there's a threat then about how well he gets on
He gets
to,
on fabulously well
yeah,
with Nell, who's 8 or
yeah,
9.
yeah,
And that again was very poignant to write, and the dialogue came
sure,
really
yeah,
quite easily as well, because he just has the trick of asking questions of
mm,
children. Not
yeah,
everybody is good at that, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And he's just interested and relaxed. And Carmel's heart, you know, can't take it because it looks too like a family for her, and that might be something, you know, she had a tough enough time bringing up Nell on her own, you know.
yeah. And then
Also,
had,
Nell, there's a kind of flirtatiousness with this
yes,
child.
oh yeah,
Sees a man for the first time.
yeah,
Actually, it's a trope also that there are women, repeatedly women in the book, who just love men.
mm,
Do you
yeah,
remember that? Do you remember that's the thing? You're not
yeah,
allowed to be
yeah,
like that now, but you know, in the
exactly. You're
70s,
a bad feminist if you do that.
you
Yeah,
know, you'd
yeah,
be a bad feminist, but lots
yeah,
of people still say it actually, you know, I get on better with men, or yeah, lots of people. I mean, not yeah, women are complicated.
yeah, absolutely. Men are too. I think everyone is. That's again, it's one of the great themes in the book, that it's
Yeah,
all, any interaction with anybody is there's a bunch of different levels going on
yeah.
at the same time, which is it's absolutely fascinating. Um, Now Carmen's relationship with Nell, that this was it just, I mean, obviously it's, you draw it as this, Nell is the everything, and then also completely enraging as well. So she means everything to Carmel, and then
It
also,
means
which,
absolutely everything to her.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but then is completely enraged. She's regularly just utterly enraged by her as well,
Well,
and that is, which is just completely natural and
I don't
completely,
think she's regularly enraged by her.
yeah,
She is enraged by, you know, uh, yeah. I mean, yeah, when circumstances shift,
yeah,
Carmel's mood shifts. Yeah, but she idealizes the child. I mean,
yeah,
the
yeah,
child is everything to her,
yeah,
and it's like sometimes she feels she's living in black and white, and then when Nell walks in, the whole place turns to Technicolor.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
kind of can see that in the characterization of Nell, that she might be the type of person who would do that,
yeah, yeah,
along with all the charm that children naturally bring to
yeah.
the room. But yeah, so but yeah,
And there's also a great mirror between when Carmel goes off teaching English in Italy at a very
right.
similar time of her life to when we meet Nell at the start. So we know that Carmel has done all this stuff as well, that she wasn't
Yeah.
stuck at home. And then we wonder then why Carmel doesn't get it when Nell goes off and does that.
I'm glad you're talking this way. I mean, none of this is stated in the
Yeah,
text. None of this is stated, okay?
yeah,
I mean, Carmel is, yeah, she is more or less infuriated with Nell now
yeah,
and then, or Nell
yeah,
acts out,
yeah,
and it's not the acting out that causes this kind of frisson, but the
yeah,
fact that you don't know what she's acting out from. You know what I mean? The
yeah,
problem is
yeah,
kind of elsewhere. Um, that's kind of normal, I think. I
yeah.
think that's how
But also, I think it's when
it
you're in that
works.
intense relationship with somebody like that, and that's what it is. It's in an intense relationship, in a, obviously, a mother-daughter or
Yeah,
way. That,
and they Nell, or I can't remember who realizes it. It's just kind of at the midpoint of the book that they realize that Nell has to go. I mean, that's built into it,
yeah,
and so that they can't save each other, even though they
yeah,
love each other completely. And
yeah,
I mean, that's what's said. And I mean, Carmel is a tough enough, as I keep saying, but
mm.
Nell finds solace in how abiding her love is. I mean, she doesn't doubt how much
Oh, she said
Carmel
it at the
loves her.
start. She said, "My mother, who did everything for me." It's quite close to the start.
Yes, and
Yeah,
there can be a thing
yeah,
with children of single parents that that they can idealize in return, or they can
mm.
absorb that, and say, oh yeah, no, she did everything for me, instead of why did you bring me into the world? I didn't ask for it, or whatever.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
different territories, different children,
absolutely. Yeah.
different
So
triangulations, or yeah.
we're back now to, I suppose, the next generation back. So the relationship. So Phil is the big character. He's kind of the, I feel the book is nearly like that kind of Wuthering Heights. It's concentric circles. So this great Phil memoir in the middle, which I'd love you to read a bit of.
Yeah.
And I
So
mean,
yeah, Phil
he's the kind of colonel.
he's
Yeah,
the ghost in the room, isn't he? Or
yeah,
the elephant in the room, or the so but Phil is gone, you know what I
yeah,
mean? He's here as what he wrote.
yeah,
He's not really here as a character. He doesn't really interact with them all that
yeah.
much, but he leaves remnants. And this is a memoir he wrote. He's a poet mostly,
Mhm.
and it's about love, when he's falling in love. I think. Oh no, yeah, he's in school, and he's in outside Tullamore. When lessons were done and we ran about the road playing, she kept to one side. This is his true love. At the crossroads, she walked off without a backward glance. So that was very precisely what I wished for. Oh, he's making a wish beside a fairy tree in the middle of the night. So that was very precisely what I wished for, with all my heart and with my eyes squeezed shut. I wished that Honora Casey might turn one day after she had bent for home, after she shook out her school day plait, while I stood admiring the otter gleam of her black hair. I wished she would check over her shoulder to see me looking yet. The midsummer night sky was swimming with stars. The last light of yesterday and the coming light of tomorrow ringed the pale horizon. I sat and stared into the dark roots of the fairy thorn bush. I stared until the air in front of me became particulate. And in that soot, I saw something, a stirring in the grass, a quick lozenge of light that flickered away. It was a shining, shivering blackness. And there was a laugh, clear as anything I have heard before or since. I heard laughter. It came out of a deep, velvety silence. It was it was released so close to my ear, he might have been sitting inside it, knowing, delicious, spiteful. The moment I heard that sound, I realized some part of God's creation was jealous of Honora Casey's black hair. So he's there talking to the fairies. I couldn't believe I was writing a man talking to the fairies. There he is.
Yeah, it's great. That was a pretty comprehensive. I mean, that passage of Phil, you're touching, I presume, very purposely every historical trope or many historical tropes. There's the church, there's the land, there's love, there's men.
Yeah.
And
animals.
Was there stuff you left out, or did you get everything in that you needed to create? Like, you create this amazing picture of this small townland, somewhere in the Midlands, and it's
well, it's where the canal and goes towards the river, and actually the canal and the river and another different river cross over at one point.
Is that where there's a viaduct? That one near the?
Yeah, it's a tiny. Well, it's a small little viaduct.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Phil, I went exploring the landscape for a while. I had a problem getting enough trees. I needed trees,
right?
For bluebells, and of course those bluebells, like bluebells in the plantation. There are bluebells in a slightly different plantation further out from where I was. I was townland specific, as I. When with the Green Road or whatever, I work very closely to the fields that are there, and so yeah, I mean the otter. I mean, I was ashamed putting in otter. That's Heaney. Okay, I mean, there is Honora. That's a bit of a cheat because actually he wasn't. Honora is an older name, although it's very popular in the 1912 census. It's not 1912. I brought it right back. We brought May Day. There's folklore. There are animals. I always like an Irish animal in a book. I have a hare in actress, and it just, I think it goes back to the childhood money, with the penny and the hen and all these. But also, I mean, my father came from a rural background, and I spent an amount of summers there when I was myself a child, and. But it was, again, Carmel was hard for me because Carmel doesn't have any imagination, as people keep telling her, right? Carmel sees what is, and it is. And so I had to write it in that very kind of this is what is, right? There's nothing else. But with Phil and with Nell, they're off with the fairies, basically. You know what I mean? They're in the tradition. They're in other spaces as well. And so I found it quite playfully enjoyable to go back into his reading. I dropped a big list of his 19th century and early 20th century songs and poems. These were the poems of my childhood as well. It's kind of not great verse, you know. I mean, mixed in with Yeats but James, you know, some of it great. I'm not going to insult Clarence Mangan or anyone that's like, you know, but all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, well, yeah, no, I would be pre that. That would be Paul Graves' Golden Treasury of Irish verse, Little Red.
Oh yeah,
you know, these would have been my parents. Gus Martin's great.
That's being republished actually next month.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Emily Lawless was in there, and lots of little treasures actually. So, but it was easy enough. I mean, I did a couple of things. One is I made the priest a more or less good character, and the difficulties, if you can spot them, are in the home, rather than in the church space. But and I did, I think, a very typical for his generation, turning away from the church, which was a huge moment for so many writers, when they walk nobly, you know, into the sunset, saying, no, I'm not going to join the church. I'm going to be a writer instead. Sometimes almost kind of either or, as it was perhaps from McGahern, you know, when you leave religion, you turn to art. So that was a kind of typical moment, I thought.
Yeah. And the effects that Phil's action has on both his own immediate family and then, you know, down the generation. And I'm fascinated that now they all read his work for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, Carmel, well, I don't want to give it away. Carmel doesn't read it so much.
Yeah. But because of let's not give that away. But
she's no imagination.
Yeah. But interesting that then Nell is reading it for comfort. Yeah, but then you know, as the reader.
Yeah. I mean, when things get bad with Carmel, she curls up with a book of poetry to soften the heart, to sweeten the heart, she says.
Yeah.
So she turns to this very quite patriarchal poet for solace.
Yeah.
Which is something we are all familiar with, I think. Yeah.
The device of YouTube, I thought was just great as well, which is that all this material that's there, that pops up, that we never think of. I never think of that. You know, God, wonder could something be on YouTube? But it's brilliant that it's there in the book, and I think it's so interesting that you use that for as what they see represented as his public image. That's coming through electronically, if you like, now all these years later.
Yeah, well, Carmel sees him in O'Neill's on Suffolk Street. Unnamed, a pub on Suffolk, on the telly in the corner.
Yeah.
She tells all her posh Trinity cohort to shut up, there's my dad. And they look at him and hear the kind of country accent and raise an eyebrow. And so, that public presence is complicated for her.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't know him.
Yes. Yeah.
So and the fact that he is well known or well regarded robs them of their right to be cross with him, because of course he's doing something important. He's doing something much more important than rearing his daughters. He's writing poetry. Who can complain, you know? So that kind of robs them of their proper grieving or their proper anger at his desertion. And
it's a great moment towards there's a letter again, that great letter towards the end from his.
So I had this problem. I wish I didn't do it, you know, but there it is. It pops up again. I did an actress, you know, that there would be that there are things that you find, and Nell finds her grandfather on YouTube because her phone pushes it at her. So there's no need to search anymore. So there's one device,
which is a great arc from the start of the book, from the, you know, if you like, the
Yeah.
pre-algorithm.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
internet has grown up during the book as well, which is great. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. It
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it pushes the image at her, but Carmel spends a long time looking at her father in her 50s. She spends a long time, trying to see him for whatever he was in America in 1983, being the poet, being charming and being serious and he says, which was one of the seeds of the book. I heard someone say this. He said, my wife got sick and the marriage didn't survive.
Which is the great lie. It really is.
It's a lie.
It's a great lie in the sense that
a
that's
lie.
not all lie. It's not all. That's not all that happened. He would.
Well, he couldn't handle it. I mean, he was
Yeah.
madly in love with his wife and he couldn't handle it. And like a poet, he had to, not handle it dramatically and write about that and feel sorry for himself, and then write about feeling sorry for himself and get everyone to agree with him,
And it's he's just he's a fascinating character, and I'm just interested in the way that you just come back to the original chat. We just said that you didn't write the book in the order that we get it. So was Phil the start of it?
I'd have to go back into my files. I think Carmel was the start, but as soon as I was, and then as I was grounded very much, you spend a lot of time in certain spaces at the beginning of the writing process, and I was also working on Phil's poetry. It was lockdown.
Yeah, great.
And I was, walking Killiney Hill every day, going, "Oh my goodness, the ferns are unfurling in the forest." And
tell us about writing the poetry. And was that? I mean, was there a moment where you had to go, God, I need to write some poems for this? Like, just
yeah. But lockdown was hard to remember. So I don't remember making those decisions either. Actually, writing books can be hard to remember. Lockdown was made that doubly hard to remember. You're in a kind of off dream space,
Yeah.
So, but once I knew that I was going to intersperse the sections with poems from Phil, and that was what would make the book, to me, kind of interesting in the way it crossed categories and forms, and that's exciting if you spend your life writing it. So that's exciting. It's not that was a new ambition, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to have to write at least 10 poems, and that caused me great anxiety and difficulty.
Yeah, and then there's two. The Yellow Bittern is that's a version of From the Irish, is it? Or
when I realized that, like a lot of Irish poets, I mean, he could translate from the medieval Irish or the 18th century Irish or whatever. I was reading, actually, during the first lockdown, I was reading in Undúnara, Poems of the Dispossessed, which is translated by Thomas Kinsella, and I was reading poems about dead birds and feeling the pang of the world ending, and these ancient poems about a little dead blackbird and the yellow bittern who died of thirst because the lake turned to ice, and that's a famous drinking poem.
Yes, yeah. And then later in the book, we got all these wonderful tropical birds. Then later in the book, the birds from New Zealand, and when Nell is down below.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, which will be also in their Maori names in the paperback. I was doing an interview in New Zealand, and I talked about the birds, and somebody translated them into Maori as I was talking on the radio, and I thought, oh my God, Nell, of course she would write the Maori names for these birds. Well, we're all quite sentimental about birds now that they're
dying. Yeah.
Yeah, now that they're not there anymore.
Yeah. And when. I mean, I know I see you acknowledge Jess Trainer at the end. So you had to go and find people to say, hey.
I said to Jane Clark and to Jess, and Jess, and I said, will you read these and tell me what I'm doing wrong? And they said, yeah, it's not, I needed someone to say, this is a poem, and maybe get the syllables down, and they took on the brief. They didn't,
Great.
Would he use punctuation? Would he be a little more modern in his sensibility? I suppose poets look at poems all the time, and they don't say, it's just, they just go, Yeah, yes. And counted out the meter, which I knew you had to do.
Yeah,
Once, so that learning curve was a lot of fun as I started pumming,
right.
counting out the meter.
Could we
Um,
have a last poem to finish?
yeah,
That'd be great.
and although he's from Tullamore, like all Irish poets, he moves west. I had a poem on Omey Island. We went off to Connemara twice during the two
Mm.
lockdowns, I think, and I was looking basically as Phil. I really enjoyed kind of inhabiting him. So I saw this rib cage on the sand dune. I thought, oh, there's a poem for Phil by Saint Me by Saint Mary's Holy Well. It's called By Saint Mary's Holy Well, which is a real place. A rib cage on the dune at Carna yields to the sky a sprung clasp grown through by marum, harebell, scented purple clover. Pink arrowhead of orchid trembles in the absent heart, the lungs wind-ruffled campion. No difference between breeze and breath. Sorry, there's the dog going mad. No difference between breeze and breath. Dog, sorry. No difference between breeze and breath in this emptied fox or sea-sucked lamb and newborn dead, its hunger eaten by grass. So apart from the pink arrowhead orchid, which killed me, it's still not right. I wanted to get that feeling of,
Yeah,
trembling, piercing where the heart had been. So it's a little bit clumsy there, but it's nearly, I think, an okay poem, I think.
I think absolutely. Yeah.
It's
That's
like,
great.
it's
And
okay.
might you, I mean, I'm dying to know what happens to Nell. So there's no chance of visiting Nell in a few years' time, is there? Like if you're doing requests, going back to the character.
Characters only exist in relation to each other
Yeah,
for the book,
yeah,
It's like they have their different voices, and I try to
yeah.
bring them together.
Mm,
And once I've affected that in some way, and I've done it in a number of books, it's
yeah,
like bring these diverging points of view through something so that things get better at the end. Then they have no other, then the antagonist is gone. You know what I mean?
right, right.
The relationship is moved. Is moved on.
Yeah. So we can't expect another book.
I can never do it
Yeah.
again. I can never. I mean,
Yeah, no,
maybe
and I'm
yeah.
sure, but I'm just absolutely fascinated by her. It'd be
Yeah, I
great to see her in
know.
10 years' time to see what's
Maybe
going on.
like two books back, I could.
Yeah,
I'd be kind of interested in Emmett and Dan from the Queen
yeah,
Road. Maybe
yeah, yeah, yeah. Great.
after the mother's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean I mean, and Constance, they exist.
yeah,
For me.
yeah.
Maybe these will. I'm still talking about them. I'm waiting for them to settle
Maybe to
down.
start to settle down. Exactly. Yeah, it's great. Well, and we've a very quiet audience, so we can wrap it up there now, which
No
is
questions at all.
no questions yet. No. So I think we can head off and just to say thanks a million.
Okay. Okay.
And this is now people will be able to comment afterwards because it's online now.
Okay.
And just to say thanks very much to you and thanks
Okay.
to everyone for watching. And we will back just short of 3 weeks on the 30th of